You see this go off at all? Can you just wait? Thank you. Brilliant. Right, thank you very much for coming. I'm sorry it's a bit noisy in here. I'm terribly mumbly, so I'll try and speak up. Thank you very much for coming. This is Charlotte Vassell, and she's here to talk about her debut novel. And yeah, would you like to do a reading?
I think I'll start and I'll introduce you to my detective. Caius Beauchamp was jogging on the spot at the bottom of Parliament Hill, trying to psych himself up for another doomed attempt at the summit. He had been dumped 3 weeks ago by Eloise, a sarcastically eyebrowed Parisian poet who saw beauty in the oddest things and cruelty in everything. One day, he had thought, she would be the mother of his children, in penance for whatever flaw, whatever fault, whatever failing that had led her to desert him for some other man, a mystery that he was yet to solve. Caius had made self-improvement his raison d'etre. Some addled, lovesick part of his brain had told him that if he got his act together, then he might have a small chance of getting her back. Thus, he designed a regimen for both body and mind. He'd taken up running and YouTube yoga. He designated Tuesday as leg day. Caius was also now on first-name terms with the staff at the library around the corner from the flat, as he slogged his way through all the books that he knew he should have read, but had previously been unbothered by. The next stage of this overhaul was to acquire a new level of Euro-chic, consumerist sophistication. So far, he had bought a black polo neck jumper, this time not from Topman but a menswear pop-up shop in Shoreditch, a new pair of glasses from a Dutch online optician, far more elegant than his usual Specsavers, a 5-kilogram tub of chocolate-flavoured protein powder from a Swedish fitness company that he couldn't pronounce, and new bedsheets from a Danish brand stocked only in Selfridges, in the sale. Some habits die hard. He'd even started going to the farmer's market on the weekend to touch up obscure varieties of organic squashes. The only squash in his upbringing had been orange. What else was a stodgy, lower-middle-class English policeman with a chip on his shoulder and an estuary accent to do, other than buy his way to bourgeois refinement and back into Eloise's heart? He thought it could work, and he was sure that was what he wanted. Adamant. Although, when he'd gone to purchase his ticket for the Eurostar that he was catching later that afternoon, he'd forgotten the PIN for his credit card, despite it being 1234. He wondered briefly if his subconscious was trying to tell him something deeply important, but he suppressed it. His train was at 3 p.m, but first he had to conquer Parliament Hill. Caius started slowly up the hill, dodging dog shit as he ascended. It was steeper than he remembered it. Feeling prematurely triumphant, he increased the pace, but soon the embers of that dreaded burning sensation began to blaze in his calves. He tried to think of other things. He tried to think of what he'd do that afternoon. His train got into Gare du Nord after 6 p.m, but then what? Caius hadn't yet worked out a plan. He did not know what to say, what to do. He would make an impromptu grand gesture and hope for the best. At the Louvre? No, too cringy. Jardin du Tuileries? Somewhere their children they could take their children and say, this is where it all happened. He wasn't sure where, but he was sure that he wasn't going to make it to the top of Parliament Hill today. It had become something of a pilgrimage for Caius. He thought of conquering the city's 23rd highest point, to become the only thing that had got him out of bed this week. He wheezed a third of the way up before deciding to walk the rest, the steep path to the top. Maybe he should go to the GP and check if he had asthma. I mean, it was probably just the pollution. London is a filthy city, a dirty, putrid metropolis. What was he even going to do in Paris? What a ridiculous idea. Eloise didn't want him. She'd said as much, but in French and therefore much more expressively. A pigeon loitered on the bench halfway up the hill, strutting across the breadth of it. Caius breathlessly flapped his arms and flung himself down. The bird was stubborn. I suppose we should just have to be friends then, pigeon, Caius said to the bird. It flew off. He pulled out his phone and checked the distance that he'd run, far enough to drop casually into conversation. Caius thought he deserved to walk back to his flat. He'd earned a slower pace. Although, he probably should do some theatrical stretches in case anyone he knew saw him. He'd seen a pretty woman in bright pink leggings at the bottom of the hill. A few lunges later, and Caius strolled towards the trees north of the bench. He did a loop through a patch of woodland, and then started to lightly jog down the hill towards the gates. Caius walked past the trees that ran along the park's boundary, not knowing the names of any of them. That might have been a birch, or an elm, or a horse chestnut. Some flowers here, a dull brown bird there, and a stiletto, oddly poking out the bottom of some scrub that probably warranted closer inspection, as did the corpse that was wearing it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's brilliant to hear you read it because I mispronounce every character's name in this entire book. Sorry?
So did I.
Oh, good.
It's on purpose. It's a thing within the book, so don't worry.
it's like I was. So the book is obviously about people who are considerably richer than me.
And me.
I had to Google what a cummerbund was, things like that. Would you mind talking a little bit about the overall story and
Yeah. Sure.
your main character, who is hilarious on the level?
So the main character is Caius Beauchamp. He's half Jamaican, half Irish, and I'm half Jamaican, half English, and I really wanted to write a character that came from a similar background to me. So I very much felt that whenever you see Jamaican characters, they're always there's always gun crime and drugs involved, and that's just not my family. They're all sat here in the library, and they're, very much kind of professional people. So I felt like actually I wanted to write something that reflected my kind of background a bit more. And I'm from Redditch. This is the library that I did the summer reading challenge in. I came to story time in the basement when I was a toddler, and I moved to London just after finishing university. And suddenly kind of the wealth in London is sort of crazy sometimes. You're walking just down Knightsbridge, which is obviously ridiculously wealthy, but you see all these cars which are just insane and don't have proper number plates because they've been brought over from Saudi Arabia for the summer for someone to show off in, and it's gold, it's like a gold Lexus. It's just the bizarrest thing, and it doesn't feel very connected to the rest of the country at all in some ways. But then London itself has some of the worst poverty in the country. I lived in Clapham for a bit. I don't know if any of you are aware of Clapham Junction Station, but you can literally be born on the wrong side of the tracks. So one side of Clapham is a very grim-looking high-rise block that I'm sure has terrible mould, and then on the other side it's these beautiful townhouses, and everyone sends their children to boarding school, and they're within a stone's throw of each other. I was living in Wandsworth Town. I used to catch the bus to the station in the mornings, and half of the people on there had been up for a few hours, and a lot of cleaners going home, and you could smell the kind of bleach on them, and then the other half were public schoolboys with Barber jackets and like Labrador hair on them and their signet rings, and it's very much like a juxtaposition between two very different ways of living. But in London you all rub against each other, but these are worlds that you wouldn't necessarily know existed unless you've been inducted into them. I used to work, I actually wrote the book on furlough during COVID, and I was working at a medieval guild. As you do. I was bored. There's only so much Bones you can watch before you go, I need to do something else now, so I wrote a book. But yeah, I was working in one of the medieval guilds in the city, and it's 750 years old, and it owns a big chunk of Fenchurch Street. It's incredibly wealthy, and everyone there involved in it's very posh, and they do a lot of charity work, but if you didn't know, you just walk past the building because you can see it on the river, and you think, that's a pretty building, and you've got no idea that once a month a load of old Etonians with titles put on their cummerbunds and their dinner jackets and have dinner with Princess Anne. It's just like a whole other world that you just wouldn't know existed. So I think that's where a lot of it, where it kind of came from, was sort of being aware of this world but not being from it, and sort of really wanting to kind of discuss that inequality, I suppose.
I love that Caius seems to be like trying to be part of that.
Yeah.
So like shopping at Selfridges, but only when it's on sale, and that sort of thing. And the part about Johnny Squash and his childhood being orange.
Yeah.
I love that because everybody has phases I've had with myself where you try and
like your
fancy
self-improvement, you start going to the gym a bit more and eat quinoa.
Yeah. So there were parts of the book where it's obviously like really funny and very satirical, but at times it felt a bit attacked. You know,
Yeah, I think
when people are in phases and things like that. Like I think it's described one character as Catholic but minimalist and going through a bit of Zen Buddhism. And everybody goes through sorts of phases of those, and you trick yourself into thinking it's going to be like that. This is my existence from now on, but then it'll phase out after like a few weeks, and then you forget about it.
Then you forget. I feel like we've kind of entered like a phase of self-improvement. It's not as bad as America. If you go to an American bookshop, like a third of it is self-help books, but we all kind of want to make ourselves better. And not necessarily be a better person, but you want to eat a bit better, you want to exercise a bit more, which is all very good for you, obviously. But there's kind of a lacking of a moralness in it, and I think Caius is with an Irish mum who's a lax Catholic. So I think some of that kind of like self-improvement physically for him to being a police officer and seeing the horrors that he does, it's sort of trying to replace perhaps the religious element that he had in his childhood. But yeah, I think Janice Hallett referred to it as like millennial Evelyn Waugh, and I feel like it's very much kind of like of my generation to be like, oh, I've made a quinoa salad for my lunch, and like I put it on Instagram, and the Instagram is a very big kind of satirical point in the novel, because I personally hate social media. I just don't want to. Like, if you know me, you know about my life. I don't feel like the need to broadcast what I had for breakfast to 20,000 strangers. It's quite odd that people do that if you actually step back and think about it.
It's like a sort of personality construction toolkit, isn't it? It's like, look at all these 12 pictures. These 12 pictures represent my interests, my fashion.
But it's all very distant, and it's all quite fake, and it's all staged, and it's not real.
Very shopfront.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a facade. Clemmy, who you find out is the victim. Sorry, my toddler. She's like an Instagram influencer, or trying to be. She's lots of yoga, but there's always this kind of question about whether she's interested in like contemporary art, whether she knows that it's ironic, and whether she's doing it ironically, and whether the detectives think she's just a silly woman because she's just taking Instagram pictures and trying to get famous on Instagram. But is it, one of the other detectives wonders if it's all performance, if it's a performance piece almost. So people have done art installations where they've created like fake social media to sort of create some sort of weird bubble world.
I love that you go so into that, because in crime fiction a lot of the time social media is just kind of touched on as a thing of like, right, let's look on Facebook, let's see who they're friends with, and that's it, and then they move on. But like everybody's life is like so much on there. You could do a lot more doing it.
You really can. Like, people give away more on social media than they necessarily intend to. And some people just will tell you where they are throughout the day. So I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing this. And if you wanted to stalk them, it'd be fairly easy, particularly if they do the same thing every week at a similar time. I'm personally just really don't like social media.
Did you have to go through a lot of it as like research?
Actually, so one thing about me is that I'm really bad at jobs. I'm very good at quitting them though. So one of the jobs I had before I trained to be an actor was working in a media agency. So I was in a central London media agency, paid an absolute pittance to sell people crisps. That's what I was doing. I worked on the PepsiCo account, and I genuinely had to write a presentation on how you sell crisps to feminists. Like, what would make a feminist buy this packet of crisps? Crikey. But like, that's, so I was very aware of how social media works from the back end, and like how people make money out of you from social media. So if you're using a social media app for free, you're the product. You're giving them your information on what you like and what you do and what you don't do, and where you go and where you don't go. So they have your data, so they can try to sell you something more effectively. Yeah,
I've seen those experiments Facebook did where they changed people's feeds to see if it changed how they posted and changed their mood. So literally playing with people's moods.
It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So I kind of come from a slightly having that in my background when I think about social media. Just a bit more cynical about it than just someone who just uses it.
We watch a lot of Downton Abbey, and I thought it was fascinating how you had your Instagram basically as the equivalent of what tuxedo you're wearing, what car you arrive in, the way you behave at parties,
Yeah,
that sort
yeah.
of thing.
But I
It's
think
become a modern.
as like a modern etiquette thing,
Yeah.
definitely. But I do think that kind of, where's your suit from? What are your shoes? That kind of sort of old school sort of class indicators still exist. There's a bit in the book where Rupert Beecham, so that's pronounced the kind of the actual way. Rupert Beecham. Don't worry, in book 2 it all gets explained. Book 2 out April.
Book two?
Yeah, book 2 out in April. With the in crowd.
Can I ask, does Rupert Beecham get his comeuppance?
Oh, he will. He has to
didn't
get
like
his
it.
comeuppance eventually. He will eventually. I can't let him off. But yeah, he has this with Alex, who's a university friend of his. So the next chapter in the book, it's right at the beginning, so I'm not spoiling it if you haven't read it. But Rupert Beecham, Rupert has his 30th birthday party in the McDonald's in Kentish Town. And I used to live near there, so I was familiar with that McDonald's. And it has an upstairs area with a kid's birthday party area, with like a ball pit and things. And he just turns up and he chucks a load of £50 notes at the poor staff who were there on their minimum wage, having to deal with drunks at some point in the night, and throws this ridiculous 30th birthday party. All of his friends in black tie and suits and tuxedos, getting absolutely drunk on the champagne. He's got a butler to bring in, and they're all doing drugs, and it's just awful. They're all awful people, and they all think it's funny. They all think it's funny to do this in a McDonald's, and that really annoys me because McDonald's is genuinely one of the only places, if you work shifts and you want a cup of tea at 3 in.the morning, McDonald's is open.
Yeah.
And it's one of the only places that you can do that. And you can get sort of hot at that time.
Yeah.
And it's working people that use things like that regularly. And it really annoys me that they can throw a birthday party and think it's this big joke. But Rupert, go back to the suit thing, he starts poking a hole in where Alex's things come from. He's like, where's your suit from? Is it from Moss Brothers?
Right.
Because Moss Brothers is a high street shop, so you know. But he's like, no, it's not. It's from a shop on Jermyn Street. You know, he's got the proper clobber as well. And it's that, they're love rivals, so that's why that happens. But it's, that kind of vanity of small differences. So you can kind of look the part, but if your tuxedo isn't quite fitting you, if your dinner jacket doesn't fit you quite well enough, because tuxedo is an Americanism, then because you won't be able to call it a tuxedo, if a smoking jacket, you've got a velvet one.
Yeah.
This is what you learn when you work at medieval guild halls. If it doesn't quite fit you properly, you know, if your shoes squeak a little bit, if they're not quite, you know, if your shirt looks a little bit cheap.
It's savage, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really brutal. It's this vanity of small differences that I think people really feed into and play with.
I thought it was interesting that you gave the detective and Rupert, who is, you know, just the poshest man in the entire book, full of very posh people, the exact same surname pronounced differently, and I thought that was really interesting.
Well, so that comes from me being Jamaican. So a lot of Jamaicans have incredibly grand surnames, and it sort of stems from plantation owners and things.
Right.
And you can actually look up the Vassells who owned plantations in Jamaica, and you can see the portrait of the last Vassell heiress in a finery, a Georgian finery. And I'd like to buy that painting and burn it one day. But yes, that's where it comes from for me.
Right.
We have quite grand names, don't we?
I thought it was fascinating that on paper his name is the same.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's
I started out writing this novel as satire, and I had it in my head as satire, but I couldn't work out how to put a plot into it with these terrible people. And then my auntie was like, maybe it should be a murder, so it became a murder. But I very much started at a point from satire, I studied history at university and at Liverpool, which is one corner of the slave trade. It's got the International Slavery Museum there, and I did a lot of modules on kind of the British Empire and colonialism, and I very much kind of fed into Rupert and where Rupert's family's money came from. Like his family's money came from finding a diamond in the Punjab the size of a tabby cap, but that's the family history of the Pitts. You know, Pitt the Young, Pitt the Elder. That's where their money came from. Pitt the Elder's father was a nabob. Like he found something in India and was like, yes, we're wealthy now. Came back to England and then it's established in the upper classes. And it's one of those things. It's so linked to British history in every facet from the 15th century that you can't pull it apart.
Yeah, we love national trust places
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. And
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't
yeah.
go to one without there being some sort of link to slavery or...
Because it was just so widespread, and I think it's one of those things. I think as a nation, I think it's just a conversation that we need to have, and just be like, this is just what happened, and just the way that the Dutch do, and they put a plaque next to a statue, and like, this person actually wasn't very nice,
Oh, really?
and they did bad things somewhere. But it's that kind of openness, I think, and knowing that you didn't do it, I didn't do it, none of us did it, but people 300 years ago did it.
Right.
We just need to just be like, oh well, they did it, and it might not have been very nice.
And these incredibly wealthy people now
Are still wealthy.
live a different life. Yeah,
They're still wealthy. The legacy's still there. I have been working since 2006. I've paid back tax to pay for the freedom of my ancestors. We only just paid off the interest of the money that was used to pay the slave owners at the end of slavery. So we've all paid tax to pay that off. I've paid tax to free my ancestors 200 years ago.
That's
Yeah, it's just like when you say it out loud, it's just like what?
It's amazing how close it was as well. I was
Yeah.
watching a documentary about Paul Robeson, and like his father was in slavery. He was alive until,
Particularly
like,
in the US
60s.
as well, because they did it 40, 50 years after Britain ended slavery. It's not that far in American history at all, and a bit further in British history.
So did the it sounds like the society came first when you were writing the book. So did you kind of build the characters up and then try to find something to do with them? Because they're all really well drawn, really like fascinating in their own right. Like you could put them in a different story and it'd still be entertaining.
Thank you.
So did you sort of develop the story and then try to figure out which one would be most interesting to be murdered?
So when I'm writing, I'm not really much of a planner. I try to plan and I fail, so I'm somewhere between pantsing and planning. So I have an initial idea, and I had who I thought the killer was, and then as I was writing it, I was like, oh no, the killer is somebody else, and it was surprised me as I went. But it's quite nice because it feels a bit more organic that way. But yeah, I very much had the kind of like Rupert and Nell and Alex were very much there, and then the detectives came a bit later. Amy was the last out of the two of them, so it's Caius and Matt, who kind of have like a buddy cop vibe. And they're like the two straight guys, but they talk to each other about their emotions, which is quite nice. And I very much I found things as I went, and the way I work, I'm very fast when I write, so I can write up to 6,000 words a day. So I can have a first draft within 3 weeks, but then I have to go back and layer it. So a lot of my first drafts are always the functionality of the story. So who's the body? Where were they found? How did they die? Who did they know? Who might want? But that's the beauty of crime, is that, and in particular writing a very traditional sort of advocacy as you've done it, you just have to follow the steps through, and then you get to go back and find them, flush it out and find the jokes. I put more jokes in every time I go back. I find another joke just to go, oh, I put that bit there, that's funny. Well, I think it's funny, I don't know. None of you laughed when you did the reading. So
That's a really like I've not heard of anybody writing that fast before. That's amazing. Especially for something that I would think needs like because the mystery in it is brilliant and really well paced, and you don't feel like you get it too early. Like the solution doesn't. You're not at the end being like, of course it was.
So, it's all in the edit, is what I would say. It's all in the edit. So I probably did 5 or 6 edits before I sent it out to agents. Then I did an edit with my agent, and then I did 2 edits with my editor, and then a copy edit. So it's been edited coming up to 20 times. But yeah, I firmly believe in like first draft, word vomit it out into a document, and then you've done it, you've achieved it, you've written a first draft. And the first draft is never going to be good, but you can always make it better. I always write a character too many. So every book I've ever written, I've had to cut a character because there's no need for them. There's just get rid of that character. There's no need for them. Yeah, or just like somebody pops up and does something and it kind of pops up a couple of times, it's just not necessary. Just chuck them.
Yeah. Do you have like a set group of people you show it to? I've been told off because I try and write. The first talk we did was with Alison and Leicester, and I said, I show my work to my wife and my father-in-law, and she's like, that's not enough. You're terrible. Stop it. Show it to more people, otherwise it won't work.
Like my husband reads it, and it's pretty much my husband, to be honest. Yeah. But other than that, But I love my editor, so I actually have two editors. I've got an American editor as well, and they're always just so insightful, and really, really helpful.
Was the American editor sort of, is it kind of their job to make sure an American audience would get some of the more British, because it's very British?
It's an incredibly British book, isn't it? Well, I mean, he said to me that I bought a British book because I want to sell a British book.
Right.
And Americans love British books, particularly if someone in it's quite ghastly.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, I'm glad we left.
Definitely.
Happy 4th of July.
I read about one book recently where they took, I think it was a young adult book, a very popular one, where it's set in Britain, the writer's British, and they released it in America and just changed all the places to American places.
Yeah.
Changed all the characters to Americans.
Yeah.
Which seems bizarre.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what the editor. That's the editor's choice, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did have my latest book being like Marks and Spencer's. Do they know if I talk about Marks and Spencer's pre-mixed cocktails in a can, are they going to get that? And I'm like, yeah, they are. Because you read books in America and it'll mention a theme park or something about Ohio, or Shark Week. That's always one that I feel like pops up. And I'm like, what's Shark Week? And then I'll just Google it and I'll be like, oh, okay, cool. It's a TV thing, a history channel or whatever. But yeah.
Did the novel change very much? Your dad was saying it's very similar to how it started out. So with the edits, more kind of minor things.
There was a small plot line that disappeared. So saying I didn't write one character too many, so that happened. But it didn't change massively, very much at all.
I love that it's so class-based in the a big theme that is the disparity between these ridiculously wealthy people, which seems like it's going to get more and more relevant as time goes on.
Yeah, I don't think that's coming from somewhere like Redditch where a lot of people are just really normal. It's a pretty normal place. People have normal incomes. No one's walking around in Gucci boots. Everyone drives a car that works. Has a normal house. There's no McMansions or anything. And then sort of going to university and coming across a few types of people. And then definitely my first job in London was working at a headhunters in Mayfair. So I used to commute into Mayfair every day, and the conversations you'd overhear in the M&S with everyone's buying their lunch, and it's quite, because London concentrates wealth, I think, because it's Europe's only global city, really, is London. And it's a lot of international wealth as well, and it's quite odd to be from somewhere that's just really normal. And I grew up with normal people. I went to Trinity down there, and having just coming from like a normal lower middle class family, and then you've just got people in the bus behind you go, oh darling, no, well I just can't be bothered to go to Saint-Tropez this year. I mean, I did it last year, and I just might go to Daddy's Villa instead and Crete. And it's just like, what? I also worked in Jermyn Street, as by me being random at jobs. I used to sell top hats in one of the traditional hatters in London. So when you've got people coming in to buy a £450 hat for the sake of it, and you're like, that's someone's rent for the month somewhere else, and you're buying a hat. Like it's quite odd to see that. If you think about just the sheer amount of money, it's quite fun. I used to have a lot of celebrities come in.
Oh really? Can I ask you who?
Oh, like David Beckham.
Oh no way.
And people like that. Yeah, it's because I used to have flat caps. Jason Statham bought all the caps one year. I was going to buy my dad one for Christmas, and Jason Statham walked in and bought them all.
I love that the characters in it and the way you write them give me sort of like American Psycho vibes. I don't know if that was an inspiration for you, but it's fascinating, I think, that because it's set in Britain, it has that kind of racial element with the slave trade and everything that you don't get in the 80s in Wall Street.
I actually never finished American Psycho because I'm really squeamish, and I got to the bit when he kills that child at the zoo and shoves him in the bin, and I went, oh no, and I never finished it. But I think an influence on me was The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which has the kind of sub-theme of kind of slightly entitled people who live in their own bubble, plus classics, which is in this book. So I think The Secret History, I'm very much a fan of like Jeeves and Wooster, those sorts of comedy of manners. I love a bit of Oscar Wilde.
There's a lot of Austen in the book.
Yeah, there's a big thing about Jane Austen and using Jane Austen to reference social class, like a whole chapter on Jane Austen. So I'm a massive Austen nerd. One of those people who can reel off the first sentence of Pride and Prejudice because it means that much to them. I love reading. I love going to museums and art galleries, and I think that very much kind of comes into the book a lot. People talk about culture. Caius, as part of his self-improvement thing, is reading a lot of books, and because potentially, he went to a slightly dodgy comprehensive in North London, so he feels like he's missed out somehow, and he's using the library to fill in the gaps of his knowledge. I love libraries. Libraries should be cherished. I love the places. But so it's that kind of, people go to exhibits and there's an Artemisia Gentileschi exhibit at one point, and someone else tries to go to the V&A, which is my favourite museum in London. Because I think art's for everyone and literature is for everyone, but it does feel quite rarefied in a way that I don't think it should, because human truths are human truths no matter your background. Everyone can find something in literature. You might take something from one story, but you'll find something in another, and it can surprise you where it comes from.
Yeah, I love that Caius has that kind of, I have it myself, that kind of almost working class guilt of I haven't read all the books everybody says you should read, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
he seems to be racing to try and catch up.
It's like, you have these checklists, The Guardian will do 100 novels you should have read, and then I'll go through it and be like, right, well I can tick off the Austen because I'm a nerd for that. Well, I've tried to read Henry James and I've failed because prose sends me to sleep. And I feel that as well. I have been a kid from a comprehensive being like, I can't quote, Dickens paragraph by paragraph off the top of my head. It's that kind of inadequacy. You think you should know this thing, you probably don't. That's what Google's for, right? It's in the back pocket and you can always find the answer.
I love that Caius is like a proper millennial with a capital N as well. We were talking about this because we had Natalie Marlowe in a few weeks ago, and her book is set in the 30s, and her detective character has undiagnosed PTSD from World War I, that sort of thing. And we were talking about how a lot of your hard-boiled noir fiction, your main characters have all got this horrible war trauma that they don't talk about, but it's always there bubbling underneath. And I feel like a lot of modern detective stories try and replicate that without the war, so they'll have a dead wife, or they'll be divorced and be estranged from their kids.
They've got an alcohol problem.
They're always really really downtrodden and probably living in a caravan by themselves, that sort of thing.
And everyone hates them.
Whenever they walk into a room, they're just like, oh jeez. So I love that Caius is so positive and upbeat, and just he's got his obsessions that are really quite entertaining. And
in some ways, I said this slightly, I hate you for saying this, my brother's a little bit like it. So my brother's like, I've got my protein macros, going to the gym. I very consciously wrote a detective that wasn't hard-boiled. Partially just because I know some police officers, and they're not. My friend Ellie's a police officer, and her spare time she's a cheerleader. She does cheerleading practice all the time, and her Instagram is just her throwing people in the air. She's not depressed and everyone hates me. She's she's got pom-poms. I very much kind of went for, how would I be if I was a police officer in some respects? And the job would probably get to me a bit, but I haven't been in the trenches.
I love that he doesn't want to look like a police officer when he's off duty. And that
he's
sort of thing.
not a police officer.
Whereas most of them in American films especially, they all just wear the same leather jacket they wear to work. And,
I think that's a difference between Brits and Americans in general, though, in the kind of, you know, Brits dress for work. I feel like Americans don't always do that. They're a bit more casual in their clothing, aren't they? So I remember when I worked in Jermyn Street, I had a gentleman come in and go, "You sell lots of suits. Do people wear suits here?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah. If you go to the city, like it's this Friday, if you go to the city now, everyone's walking around in a suit and tie." And he's like, "Oh, we don't do that." I'm like, "You're from Colorado, so of course you're not dressing up in a tie." And yeah, that kind of formality, the difference between work and play as well. I think that's a big thing. If you wear a suit to work, you don't wear a suit on the weekend because you want to differentiate your time.
I love that about this book, that it's so British, and if you take the Britishness out of it, it takes a lot of the character out of it as well.
Yeah.
Because I feel I'm not a big fan of stories where they can be set anywhere. So, sometimes they do that, and it's like, you know, they're making a point, which is fine. But I like it when things are very specific and you can tell, you know, the Britness in because you love this place.
Well, a lot of the places in London are places that I've been to myself, or I've lived near there. And I mean, fundamentally, I wrote this book during COVID, with the kind of bumbling Boris Johnson shoving money to his mates, and it all feels a bit dodgy. And that was kind of the background to the satire that kind of played through it. And it kind of feels really hard to avoid class when you've just had a succession of old Etonians as prime ministers, and no one thought they'd have another old Etonian since Alec Douglas, who should have been the last one. And yet we've just had
everybody in our sort of ruling political elite.
And that Bullingdon photo, right, with Johnson and Osborne and Cameron, all three of them. We've shaped policy, like they've shaped the last decade of British life, austerity and you know, Brexit, and they all have this very small group of people from a very small background who treat it a bit like a game.
And it's interesting because everybody else is kind of, you know, from a point down, everybody's in kind of eat or eat, that sort of thing. Just to see people living this kind of lifestyle is infuriating, but it's important to.
And I think that was the juxtaposition between McDonald's and what they're doing in a McDonald's. Because because like we all think McDonald's isn't particularly healthy, but at no point in human history have you ever been able to go and get a cheap piece of protein as a 99p hamburger than you have at any other point in human history. That's the easiest we've ever had it as a species to get your protein requirement for the day.
And you've got people striking and things, so I've no doubt if McDonald's staff went on strike, our media would demonise them to the hills. But you know, these fellas who are wandering around throwing away, you know, spending $1,000 on
crazy money, up to $6,000 on the top hat.
That's right.
If it's a vintage silk one, they can't make them anymore because the factory that used to make the really fine silk in France burned down because the two brothers who owned it had a fight. It was glass, and no one else knows how the machines work. They're never written down, so they've never been able to replicate it. So if you're ever in a provincial auction and you see a silk top hat, buy it and sell it on.
That's amazing. But it's the extra 20p an hour that the rail workers want that's the problem.
Versus billionaires not paying enough tax.
Could you talk a bit about how you got into writing in the first place? Have you always been a writer? Did you just go, let's have a go at that during COVID
I wrote a really terrible fantasy novel about 5 years before, which you can't read it anymore. I took it off Amazon. It was bad. But in between the two books, I did train as an actor, and I think that really helped with my writing. It made my dialogue a lot sharper. Because there's nothing worse when you're trying to play a character and you've got your script and there's just words that don't mean anything and have no point. So my dialogue got really good after that, and because you see like really rubbish short film strips from students, you're like, this is bad, so I know what bad looks like. And then I also, you can't spend weeks and weeks and weeks poring over a Shakespeare text, pulling it apart word by word to find the kind of the truth in it and to portray the truth in it without thinking about how, like, it just changes. It changed something in the back of my head, I think.
So that helped you with
maybe a much better writer, and I think in terms of having having plots and moving them along. Personally, I know there's a bit of a thing in literature at the moment versus plot versus vibes books. Whereas like a lot of kind of literary fiction is kind of vibes, but there's not really much of a story. But people telling you a backstory and how they feel about something, but there's nothing happening. Whereas I'm very much like plot, 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 plot. And I think for my kind of studying theatre, sort of very much got into a 3-act kind of thing in my head. But I think the most important thing if you want to be a writer is just to read, and it's to read widely and to read discriminatorily. So if you read something and go, I don't like it very much, I'm not enjoying it, fair enough, but why? Why don't you like that? Is the plot too slow? Do you find the prose a bit stodgy? Is it a bit too flowery? Is it not simple enough? It's not moving as long.
Yeah. So you're not a fan, so you just read everything, not like, so I write like horror basically.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you just read horror and then you write horror, you're going to write the same horror as everybody else.
Exactly, and I think if you experience literature as a whole, so what I love about books is every single book you pick up is another world, and it's another perspective, and it's an experience that you hadn't thought about. And I mean, we're sat in a whole room full of other people's experiences and thoughts and ideas, and you will always learn something from somebody else, even if you didn't particularly like the book. Something interesting might spark to me. What I do between edits is I try to make myself read 20 other things, just as a palette cleanse, so I can go back and look at my work and be like, this line is bad, cut it. Because I've just read something really good, and this is in comparison, this is bad.
Do you sort of deliberately structure things? Like, this book is it's like over the course of a week and a half, so it's structured by days. Like brilliant, and it reads really well. Was that a deliberate thing, or was that something that kind of came through edits?
That was deliberate, so I planned it like that so I could work out where everything was at a particular time, because time is so important in crime novels. But I actually picked it up from a novel from the 30s called Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day, if anyone's read that. It's been republished recently by Persephone Books, but it's the whole novel is this kind of governess, and she gets in a mishap, and it's very much a comedy of manners. It's set in the 20s, and it's very glamorous, and she's like a dowdy governess, but every chapter of the book gives you the specific time with it, so it'd be like 8:13 to 8:42, and that chapter happens between those two bits. So I think I kind of took that as quite a useful way of structuring the book.
Oh, brilliant.
It's like a cheat for me, really.
Yeah. Oh, it worked really well. I can't believe it. Sort of, did you end up having to have like a murder board, like detectives do, where you had to put all the clues in one thing, and how did you?
No, I didn't do that. That sounds like a really good idea, though. I did have a spreadsheet where I plotted whose chapters were which.
Right.
But yeah, the kind of dropping clues in kind of just happened naturally, and then I kind of would go back and in the edit I probably might add a red herring here or a red herring there.
Yeah. Did you have any interesting reactions to the book now that it's out? Released in January, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So do you have any interesting reviews or anything where it's like, where people have read things into it that you didn't intend, or picked up on things that you didn't expect people to pick up on?
Not particularly. No, I think everyone's kind of just taken it quite squarely on the nose.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not for everyone, because not every book is for everyone.
Yeah,
That's just how the world is, right? But yeah, I think the satirical part of it is timed to quite a few people.
Yeah.
And if you do like a whodunit, like it does have that other side of it as well.
Yeah. And this is a series now, I understand.
Yeah, so this is book 1, book 2 is out in April, and I've got to start writing book 3 soon. So I'm planning that at the moment, planning very loosely. I've got a spreadsheet and an idea for 5 chapters, and that's it. So I'm just going to have to sit down and chuck a few thousand words at a page and see what sticks.
How do you plot the extra books in this series? Do you kind of pick a new location or a new interesting way of murdering someone, or is it?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm really allowed to talk about it. It's just got to be a copy edit and the proofs aren't out yet.
Yeah.
It's called The In Crowd. So one thing I thought was quite interesting was like a sort of juxtaposition between kind of old-fashioned society events, and we all kind of probably go to one every now and then. So whether it's the proms, or if you go to Chelsea Flower Show, the races at a particular time, or Henley or something. We've all kind of dabbled in the odd bit of this, and I thought it might be interesting to kind of play with those sort of things. but juxtapose it with something much more normal.
Oh.
So that's the kind of vague idea that I've got. I've got an end point. I know how it ends at the very end, but I'm not going to give anything away. You have to pre-order book 2.
Does anybody have any questions for Charlotte?
So you say you wrote it in lockdown, like, I'm just going to write a book. So how did you go about the process of doing that? And then also, how did it change when you came to book 2? Because you were then under contract. And then did your process sort of change with that?
It very much did. So I think book 1 was like an obsession for me because I was bored. So the reason I could write that many words a day is I didn't have children, and my husband's a teacher, so he was in another room kind of doing kind of Zoom teaching. So I was just sat in my flat on my own. So I got to chuck everything I had, like a full working day every day, for a month at this book. And I wrote a brief plan actually, and I had chapters, and I followed it to begin with. And then as I got into the flow of the book, it disappeared. I actually wrote another book 2, and then chatted it over with my American editor. And he was like, oh, I don't know if that works, you've made that really hard for yourself. So I was like, no, he's right, he's totally right, this book is bad. Chuck it. So I chucked it, and I wrote another book in October. So that's the new book 2. But now I've got children, so it's been a bit harder. So I couldn't just
do that.
I work late at night sometimes.
Right.
So when they're at nursery and I've gone to bed, I'll work for 3 hours. I edited this book at 4 in the morning.
Right.
When my twins would wake up for a milk feed, and I just go, well, you know what? They're going to be up at 7, so I've got 2 hours now. I may as well edit this now. So I'd kind of work at weird times. It was already all over the place because I didn't know whether it was day or night anyway, so I may as well just do it. And this time I've tried to write a plan again, but I haven't really. I don't think it's how my mind really works. I think a lot of stuff happens in the background. Keats, I think it's Keats, one of the Romantic poets, had this theory about how your subconscious mind is working all your creative things out before you're aware that it's worked it out. So I feel like I do that a little bit.
How did it feel throwing away an entire novel? Like, just makes me stomach up.
I think I took about 2 chapters from it, and that was it. It was hard, I cried, but then I was like, I want the work to be good, and anyone who's enjoyed the first book and then has ordered the second, like it's a privilege, and I have a duty to write the best book for those 12 people who are mostly in this room with all my family members. So yeah, it was hard. It was like, oh god, I've got to start again. I've got to get a new crime. I cried down the phone to my husband. I was going for a walk, like I need inspiration, and I've just got this really vague idea about Oscar Wilde pun, and then. So yeah, but it was really tough. But I was like, sod it. I mean, how many writers have got random books and drawers that have never seen the light of day? I wrote a romance for fun at one point last year. I've got a romance novel in a drawer. It's not very good.
I was devastated when I heard about the phenomenon of practice novels.
Practice novels.
Yeah. Because I've only written one, and I'm like, oh no, mine's a practice.
This is my second, so you might just be the next.
Yeah, you know. There's one writer who wrote 13 novels before he got an agent. It's just like.
There's a writer in my agency called Wiz Wharton whose book Ghost Girl Bananas out now. It's really interesting. I haven't read it yet, but it's her mum was from Hong Kong, and it's sort of about her mum moving to the UK, and it's different family members and timelines, and it's been reviewed in all the major newspapers, in the New York Times, massive. This is her 7th book, and this was the last one. She's like, I can't keep doing this. This was the last book, and then she signed and sold it, and it's doing phenomenally well. It's really beautiful, apparently.
Brilliant. She will carry on then.
Yeah, I hope so.
Brilliant. That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's kind of don't give up, because also sometimes you might have written a book and it's just not quite right for now, but it might be right in 3 years' time.
Right.
So
I've heard that a lot because I've written a post-apocalyptic thing. And
yeah.
There was a time there where people were just like, who wants to read that?
You can't read this. It's too much.
Yeah. Did you have a long process of finding an agent and that sort of thing?
I think I started sending out in July, and then I met my agent in the March. But I very much, after my auntie advised me, I had a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It was very organised. I sent them out in batches, of like 5 at a time, so I didn't feel overwhelmed.
Oh, brilliant.
And then in case anyone gave me any feedback throughout the process, and I could kind of take it on board. And I was working my way through the agent's list and getting the writer's artist handbook, which I'm sure the library probably does have a copy of actually. And because it's quite good because it's got all the legitimate agents, because there's always someone trying to take advantage of creatives. And it's got everyone who's legit in the book. And I got to R. I was right by the end before I signed to my agent. I went through alphabetically.
I was speaking to your auntie the other day, and she's doing brilliantly with self-publishing.
Yeah. Then that's the other route, particularly if you write like fantasy or horror or romance or crime, like genre writing, particularly because people who love the genre will always look for different things, new things within it.
Did you ever consider going Did you self-publish your?
I did self-publish the first one, but it was bad, so no one ever needs to read it.
Okay. But it must be nice to do it through a traditional publisher and have that team of editors.
Yeah, I feel really lucky because I'm published by Faber Faber, so they're not a huge publisher, they're technically an indie. So every book they've got, they want it to be a success, and they chuck a lot at every book. And the marketing team, the PR team are all fantastic.
Yeah, and they're ridiculously well respected. They've published like Nobel laureates.
I went to the summer party. And I was like, oh, it's Kazuo Ishiguro, don't talk to him, don't talk to him, don't talk to the guy who won the Nobel the other year, just leave him alone. And my agent's party, it was Sadie Smith, I was like, just don't talk to Sadie Smith. She's just happy in the corner, just don't harass the nice people.
Yeah. Brilliant, that sounds very intimidating,
but I'm a nobody. I don't know anybody in publishing, and I just sent it out because I was like, this isn't bad. I've took out and bought some bad books in my time. This book isn't bad, so why not? I'm gonna throw it out there. I'll probably write something else because I love writing, and I get bored quite easily, and it keeps me entertained. And I'll write something else. So I'm just going to chuck it out there and see if the universe wants to send it back to me. And it worked. Like I said, I don't have a mate who's a publisher.
Yeah.
I didn't go to Oxford, so the guy in the room next to me doesn't work for a publisher. You know what I mean? I don't have the connections to the industry at all.
Yeah, you see that a lot now with every television celebrity, it seems, has started writing novels and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that doesn't bother me too much, the whole kind of actors and comedians, because I think the impulse to tell a joke, particularly in the UK, because comedy in the UK the sets tend to be narrative, so someone will tell you a story rather than lots of one-liners. And actors as well. I mean, I trained as an actor, but it's the exact same impulse to tell a story and to tell truth to someone, a human experience, pass that on. It's the exact same one between acting and comedy and writing. So it sort of makes sense that people move between them.
It's a sign that the publishing industry is probably doing quite well if everybody's joining it.
And at the end of the day, as readers, you just want to read good stories, right? And if you don't really care that much whether that person used to be on a TV show that you kind of liked, I mean, it might make you buy it in the first place, but if it's a good story, it's a good story. You're going to tell people that you just read a really good story.
Well, Endon has been the same room as Zadie Smith.
Yeah, that was.
I
was
as
just
good
like,
as you can get, isn't it? It's amazing.
Very, very weird. She seems very nice.
Does anybody else have any?
One question. You did X amount of drafts to get to the finished product.
Yeah.
When you got to the end, did you think this is? I can't do any better than this. This is the best it's ever. Did you think?
I think I could tinker forever.
To like improve it.
No, I think I could tinker forever. I've just done the copy edit, and I've just tinkered with the copy edit here and there, changing for the bits here, and I've to change the odd adjective here and there, or deleted a sentence here and there. But I think there's a point you just have to let something go. Otherwise, you'll just never publish it.
I'm always amazed whenever I finish a draft. I'm like, I'm a genius. That's amazing. And then you go back like 3 weeks later, and you're just like, this is the worst thing I've ever read. What is this? Who thought this was good?
So what you're saying is, there's no such thing as
I don't think there's any such thing as perfect. I think there's perfect enough. So I try to go for perfect enough rather than perfect. So drive yourself insane.
Okay, inspiration for characters. Where did you draw them from?
Terrible boys have dated. That happened. If you know, you know. I think the characters of Nell and Caius, I think I put a bit of myself into each of them. And then otherwise, it's just kind of you just bump along with people, don't you? You just see a funny trait here and there that people do. One thing Matt and Caius, the two detectives, do is whenever they see each other at the beginning of the day, they'll use like hello from a different language. But that's something we used to do at drama school. It was like a warm-up game. So I kind of went, that's, and it's because people, if you're friends with someone, you do have your own little quirks. your Wittgensteinian word game if you're going to be philosophical about it. But you have your own little language, and I thought, oh, it's nice that they have their own little language. So I gave them that quirk that I'd learned at drama school.
Are they both back?
They're both back. Amy's back.
Brilliant.
Rupert makes a terrible appearance too.
Right.
As the corpse, I hope. As the corpse.
As the corpse. Wow.
Wait and see.
So we have to order book 2, aren't you?
So, Charlotte, you've written a book now. Do you think it could go as far as the golden screen?
So I have sold the TV rights. So watch the space.
Yeah, brilliant.
So yeah.
Who would you cast as Rupert?
Oh, I don't know. Because all the actors I keep thinking of are probably too old. But I don't have any power in any of that. So they can cast who they like. I just take what you want. Oh no. They can. I don't know. It's different things, aren't they? Different mediums, different art forms.
Yeah, you wouldn't
I don't know if it would. No.
Did you have any actors in mind when you were writing the characters? You have a picture.
Do you know the only one was Alex in my head? You know Theo James?
Oh yes.
Yes, in my head he was Theo James. Yeah. You could put Caius as the Duke from Bridgerton. That's quite helpful.
Absolutely.
You're like it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the one I was like, he should be Caius.
Absolutely. That's exactly who I pictured.
Yeah, this is lovely.
Does anybody else have any questions at all?
I didn't do a huge amount of research because a lot of the things are just things that live rent free in the back of my head. So I go to an Artemisia Gentileschi exhibit at one point, and she's my favourite painter. So I already kind of had that in the back of my head. And another character gave a lecture on the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, and again, another thing that I really love. I will go to any exhibit on the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood that comes up. So that was all kind of just in the background of my mind. Book 2, it was a bit more like, have I just used everything up in my house? And with the McDonald's, I don't know. That's a really good question. But the publicist in the US has emailed McDonald's corporate to ask if they can throw a party for the New York one. I reckon because he thinks Rupert bribes the staff, so they get him to turn the cameras off and just gives everyone 50 quid, like £50 notes. So he kind of gets away with it because he's so charming and everything has been easy for him his entire life. So he can just do that. He can just chuck a 50 quid note at someone and the problem disappears.
I love that you can tell from how he speaks to people that that's the case. That he's never been told no.
No.
He's never met a problem he couldn't solve without
cash. It's much to his detriment as a person.
Do you come up with the title of your book at the beginning or at the end? Or?
So I didn't come up with this. This is my agent. So I had a different name for it. I called it Demi-Monde. So sort of like which means like half world, which was what the French kind of called the sort of courtesan-esque, kind of slightly filthy side of upper Parisian society, sort of the Belle Epoque. And my agent was like, it makes sense once you read the book, but it doesn't jump out at you. So he came up with this one. So yeah, but yeah.
You like this one?
Yeah, I think it works really well. So the other half is how the other half lives, but then you've got Rupert, who's the other half to Clemmy, the girl who gets murdered, and he's dodgy.
It's got quite great covers. I've seen another edition of it.
Yeah, so the paper
Is that the
back,
paperback
the UK paperback is different, and the American cover is different as well.
Do you get any input into that, or are they just sort of like, we know what works?
They're professionals. They've got data. They've got a sales team that goes around and knows what people respond to.
Yeah.
So they kind of decide the vibe, and you get options.
Oh right.
And there's a couple of different options on this, which is very similar to this.
Anybody else?
Well, thank you for suffering through me talking for an hour.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. No, thank you. So I have so many happy memories of this library.
Yeah.
I love this place.
Do you feel like there's a lot of worries about libraries going, nationally?
Yeah.
Lots of libraries are being closed down.
It's a shame because I think libraries provide so much more. It's a safe space, it's a third space, it's somewhere that you can go that isn't, you don't have to pay to be there. It's not working, it's not home. Every book here isn't empathy. Like it's someone else's story. It's empathy, which is important.
In America, they've got the big old censorship pattern going on with librarians being threatened with jail time.
Yeah.
For any book that has an LGBT.
I mean, we've been there before, though, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you for having me. Thank you.
We don't have copies of Charlotte's book, but
They
you
do
can
have
get
them in
them.
Waterstones, I think.
Waterstones over there.
So,
Well, thank you.
Charlotte, do you want me to sign it?
Okay. 2012.